This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Good morning. This is Breaking Banks Europe, and today we are covering the WebSummit in Lisbon. The WebSummit is a gathering of innovators and technology firms around the world, focusing on internet technologies. This time it was in Lisbon, and one of the most interesting narratives that's coming along in the internet world is the metaverse. And it's and in Europe there are very few startups that have kind of had a lot of traction in that space, and one of them is Boson. So with me today I have the CEO of Boson, Justin Banon. Justin, please say hello to our listeners.
Hi everyone, great to be here, and thanks Ajit for having me.
Great, thank you for joining us. So there has been a lot of hype about this metaverse thing. I mean, what exactly is it, and what are you guys doing with it?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways of viewing the metaverse. One is that it's the kind of evolution of the interface with which we engage with the internet. So whereas the current interface is whether it's desktop or mobile, is essentially a 2D flat screen. The metaverse is this immersive digital space that brings together some of the best attributes of real life, like 3D immersive, and together with some of the best attributes of digital, such as social and the ability to kind of be geography independent.
Right. And you were at WebSummit, and was there a lot of discussion about Web3 and the metaverse at WebSummit this time?
I mean, there's certainly there is a lot of discussion of Web3. I think the kind of gateway drug, if you like, is the metaverse. I think with all of these technologies, there is either a use case or a sort of an aspect that really engages the public, and definitely, well, it started with NFTs and it's now evolved into the metaverse, and so that is very, very much the kind of conversation, and obviously the recent announcements with Facebook, the kind of Web 2, Web 3 discussion is very active.
Yeah. So what exactly is Web? Give me a history from your perspective. What's the difference between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3? Is Web 3 just a label for people to promote cryptocurrencies, or is there something more going on there?
Well, my interpretation is Web 1 was very much a kind of flat, static, informational, basically putting static information on web pages. And what Web 2 brought was a number of things. One of them was social and interactive with user-generated content, etc., rather than sort of content generated by the website. But also Web 2 brought a number of business models that were enabled by the technology. And one was the platform business model. The original concept of the platform business model was that you would have a digital facilitator that would bring together like consumers and producers, buyers and sellers, that will co-create value. And you would create this kind of sharing economy. It was a highly efficient, more democratic model. Now, it didn't play out like that, because instead of the platforms facilitating this new kind of more open business model, they found themselves in a position of very, very strong market power, combined with lots of, with a very, very strong imperative to kind of, if you like, abuse that market power to extract maximum profits. And so we've seen this huge problem with monopolistic behavior with Web 2, whether that's sort of Amazon, Facebook, etc. And one aspect of Web 3 is a means to protect users against that. So you can think of it as moving from the kind of promises of don't be evil, Google's previous tagline, to can't be evil. So with Web3 systems, we can build systems that are hard coded to maintain the rules, and even the founders can't change them. To change those rules would require a consensus of users and token holders.
So that brings us to your journey, which is, how did you fall into this metaverse rabbit hole, and what made you start Boson Protocol?
Well, my journey is kind of both business and academic. I did a master's in digital very early, learned all the playbooks of network effects and platforms, used that to, I was a sort of MD of a group of companies that were basically doing digital, analog vouchers, paper and plastic vouchers. And I used this whole kind of new digital paradigm to transform them into a global digital platform with about $1 billion turnover. And so became kind of heading up this quite very successful and quite extractionary platform that didn't sit very easy with me. And so I was continuing to study a lot about business models. And then I came across this new paradigm of Web3, decentralized business models, this new toolkit for incentivizing with tokens. And just like so many of us, went down that rabbit hole, ended up doing a master's. And I thought, okay, what happens if we represent products and services on a blockchain in a way that prevents capture by centralized entities? And could we create a network that is almost like the TCP/IP for commerce transactions?
So what will I be able to do with Boson Protocol? Amazon started in 98, was it? And then it was just a bookstore. And, a lot of us didn't see what it could become, right? So you are kind of at that early stage of your journey. I think it's this first year or the second year.
Yeah.
So what can I do with Boson Protocol today?
Okay. Well, let me just answer that question by saying, the vision is that we will be like a clearing rails for all commerce transactions, like a bit like Bitcoin aspires to be for monetary payments, for non-monetary transactions. We want to transfer products, services, that you do that on our network. But, you mentioned Amazon with the books, and I think that strategy of identifying a niche that a beachhead.
It's ready right now, yeah.
Is a very good strategy. We picked, at the beginning of the year, we picked the metaverse. We had quite a bit of help from Jamie Burke and Outlier Ventures.
Jamie is such a metaverse champion, yeah.
Yeah, but we were helped to see that early. We saw that early, and we started investing heavily in that back in January. And it's turned out to be quite a good bet. So, Amazon chose books for various reasons. We have chosen the metaverse because our protocol uses NFTs encoded with game theory to enable a trustless transaction between buyer and seller. So for you to buy a physical item. And so what we're enabling right now is we're launching tomorrow, actually, Boson Portal, which is an application that leverages the underlying protocol. Boson Portal is like a shopping mall, gamified shopping mall application in Decentraland. And what it enables is brands to sell physical items in the metaverse as NFTs. So you can walk around, you can go into this mall, you can play some sort of a quest. It's all kind of gamified and experiential. But ultimately what you can do is you can go and buy a pair of sneakers as an NFT and redeem them in the real world. So it's like a foundational primitive connecting metaverse to the universe. And
so there has been, so you saw Mark Zuckerberg's intro to the metaverse. What are your thoughts on that? It was quite polarizing on social media. How do you see Mark's views?
Like I said, I'm poacher turned gamekeeper in a lot of ways. I studied the platform playbook. I built a platform that was designed to be maximally profitable. Facebook has an imperative to extract value for its shareholders. And that fundamental doesn't change no matter what clothes the wolf wears. Facebook's imperative is to extract value. And so, I think there's a place for everyone in the metaverse, but I think the public, it's going to be harder and easier for Facebook to create like a digital prison and capture us in. Because on the one hand, it's going to be harder because everybody knows their game now. Everybody knows about data hoarding, monetization, extraction, lock-in, locking people into a system and all of those Web3 games. We all know that. But on the other hand, they control all the instruments to control public opinion, right? They control politicians, they can, So,
I mean, we are a fintech podcast, right? And a lot of our audience may not necessarily be, they must be seeing if you're on social media, you can't go by without seeing metaverse and meta and all that, right? But if you're not so active on social, then for our banking and fintech audience, what will banking and fintech look like in the metaverse? Because of course, I don't believe we'll just be on smartphones like we are today, clicking on apps like we do today. There must be something going on. So, what should the fintech people think about when they think about the metaverse?
So, I think the metaverse is. I use an analogy with TVs. Initially, all we could produce were black and white TVs, and then we got the technology to create color, which is more like real life. And nobody has a black and white TV. Of course, you'd have color. And this interface is very similar. At the moment, we've got the technology to enable 2D, but now emerging is the technology to enable 3D immersive. And we will know, I think in 5 years' time, we will no sooner be using a flat surface than we would use black and white TV. So what does that mean for banking and finance? From a user experience point of view, I think we will see once again immersive experiences where you can go and sit down with your bank manager in the metaverse, or go and engage with these organizations as perhaps we did once before.
So I can go around a bank in Decentraland and find my 24 words that are in a locker or something, and so on and so forth. I'm just getting a bit spooky.
If you think about user experience layer of the metaverse, that is what we're talking about. But of course, the much bigger factor for banks and fintechs is the fact that the open metaverse runs on crypto. The open metaverse runs on a set of technologies that enables massive financial innovation. So, I expect that along with the metaverse will come a lot of competition for banks, for fintechs, a lot of innovation, and also a lot of opportunity. So we're unlocked. This is all built on a substrate that's designed to securely transfer value. So that's the difference, right?
So I can have a much more immersive experience and it's not just the apps anymore. It could involve VR. It could involve augmented reality. Would have probably far better analytics. But what about the decentralized aspect of this, right? So I work in DeFi for Aave, and we are kind of one of the most well-known protocols, DeFi protocols in the space. So I'm just thinking, let's say somebody is navigating Decentraland or it's in the they are in the Boson metaverse. Maybe they can interact with DeFi protocols like Aave and then experience a far richer experience in an infrastructure that people actually own, right? And Chris Dixon has been saying, Phase 16Z has been saying Web3 is about ownership. So how? How would that work?
An example is with Boson Protocol. So we are actually built on DeFi infrastructure. So when we say, a very simple use case is you can go and purchase an item and redeem it in the real world. But actually what you could do is you could purchase like an ERC20, an actual kind of token that represents this item. And that token could actually be trading on some sort of bonding curve with a floating value. So instead of these kind of static pricing paradigms that we have currently with websites with lists of static prices, all of these items can essentially be flowing over DeFi, could be used for collateral for loans, could be fractionalized, all using Boson Protocol, collateral for loans, fractionized, price discovery using things, like bonding curves. So essentially, you could, one of the aspects of Boson Protocol is the ability to kind of like crowdfund a product. So let's say you have, 1,000 products in your warehouse, you can go and sell them using Boson. But equally, if you are looking to build, let's say you and I have the idea to build a hoverboard, we could go and in advance sell the tokens for that product and raise the money to go and build that hoverboard, a bit like a decentralized Kickstarter. So the fact that protocols like Boson are built on DeFi gives them this kind of composability and financialization. So, in answer to your question, I think you're going to find that this whole world is inherently financialized because it's built on decentralized technology that enables the transfer of value. So, protocols like Aave, I know they've done some great stuff with things like Aavegotchi, and I, expect gamified applications that are also, where you can play to earn value and value being an intrinsic component of this immersive space.
So what's driving this, mega trend, if you will, towards immersive gamified experiences? I mean, are we trying to escape the day-to-day reality of the physical world, or are we, is there a whole new generation that grows up playing games and just in that way? What are the drivers?
I think there's a convergence of drivers, almost like a perfect storm. Certainly, there is a whole, we've been talking about VR and, for decades, really. And I think finally the technology is making it possible. And it's, so that's one driver. A whole generation of people brought up on games is another. COVID is definitely another driver. Yeah. But I think there's a massive driver from crypto, which is for the first time, we have property rights in digital. And if you look at any economy, if you look at economy without, if you're in the middle of, let's say, Africa or South America in a country where if you own property, it could just be seized by the government or local, it shows that economic growth is typically pretty low. There's no point in investing in and working to have assets. But if you're in an area where property rights are strong, then it makes sense, and what we're seeing with the rise of crypto is both in terms of money and, fungible and non-fungible assets, money and things, that now we've got strong property rights. You can own a flaming sword or a piece of art, and no one can take it away in these decentralized worlds. And that is what is driving the economic growth. I mean, how valuable can an item be in Facebook or Roblox if they can delete it, or you can never wear it or take it out of that environment? But when you have proper ownership, then economic systems build, and that's I think the primary driver is we're building this kind of economic system as well as this immersive 3D world.
So, and quite a few systems are somewhere in between, right? When I look at OpenSea, sure, it's got a crypto backend, but it's still a website owned by a company that takes, I think, 2.5% of the cut on every NFT sale. I mean, it's kind of not Web 2. The front end is Web 2, the back end is Web 3. At some point, they might, distribute the ownership of Web 3 more widely, or rather, participation and decision making more widely through tokens to a very large community of buyers. They may do that, they may not do that, but it's not a fully user-owned decentralized system. It's quite centralized. There is still a take rate, which is 2.5%, right? And there is a whole spectrum between, let's say, pure Web 2 like Facebook, and then pure Web 3, let's say Bitcoin, right? I mean, where it's truly decentralized and community owned, or Ethereum. So how do you see this evolving? Are we going to, is this a pendulum? People will go back and forth between centralization and decentralization, or are we going to go towards a more decentralized, user-owned system of platforms? I mean, what are you betting on?
I think it needs to be a mixture. But the key is to have a balance and to not have domination by single monopolistic entities.
Yeah, like nobody should have the power to cause
Yeah.
Brexit or the election of Trump or
Yeah.
a domestic unrest in some emerging country. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you take, for example, like what we're doing with Boson Protocol, this being the backbone for commercial transactions, that needs to be secured from, kind of economic capture, and people need to know that they can build on that securely. However, there's also, we need to have economic incentives for people to build applications. And in particular, right now, building bridges from Web 2 to Web 3 is the most important. Once you've got the infrastructure in place, building the bridges from the old system to the new system is the next most important thing to do. And we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, we have a number of, we've given grants to a number of organizations and started a number of organizations that are doing exactly that, because we're seeing such enormous demands from, brands, really major global brands and small, that want to come and use the technology, want to come and sell physical items in the metaverse as NFTs, but don't have the wherewithal to pick up a core protocol and integrate with it. And so enabling those on and off ramps is absolutely essential for usage. So I think, provided that there's this kind of balance and that, the profits that are made are driving innovation rather than, creating.
In fact, if you look at, so Facebook obviously started as an innovator, and they are the poster child for Web 2, if you will, apart from Google. But then they've become very acquisitive, right? So Facebook in the recent years has acquired WhatsApp, has acquired Instagram, has acquired, hundreds of companies that are on Wikipedia, but we don't know about. So, and now they also want to launch their own, money, or a stable coin, Novi, and that has had a massive reaction, especially in Europe, right? An unfavorable reaction in Europe about the power that one single corporate might have as a result. So this seems like, Web3 movement in terms of more decentralization and user ownership seems like something, policy and regulators should encourage, but I'm not seeing a lot of that. I mean, how do we, especially financial regulators, right? Because as you said, there's an aspect of property ownership and money, and that gets a lot of policy institutions excited, sometimes not in the right way. So how do we go about educating, or rather sharing what we know and what we see, and creating a more enlightened system of policy and regulation that supports global internet scale innovation is a question, because I'm not seeing a lot of that in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, there's one part which is education. I mean, the great thing about democracy is that public opinion can just replace the people that represent us with people that, replace people with people that actually represent our views. So which is actually far easier than educating the current cohort of people. I mean, and if you look at some of the kind of congressional hearings and stuff, I mean, there is a very, very big gap to cover. I think it would be better for us, and there's a big movement in the US and also here in the UK, that, we should galvanize public opinion to let them know
to support people that get it.
Yeah. Right. The opportunity economically, for example, for, the UK, US, to embrace this technology, to do smart, to do smart and effective regulation, but to enable this next wave of innovation to flourish, there is an enormous opportunity for those countries. And so,
exactly,
and I think, my perspective is to try and, maybe educate the public, encourage this paradigm shift in consumer behavior, and then let the public do its thing, which is vote for politicians that get it and that can bring in kind of smart regulation of this technology.
Right, absolutely. I think that's a really valuable perspective. So have you seen any interest in what you're doing from the financial services, the fintech industry, or you're sort of still?
Yeah, we do. I'm about 5 days from an announcement. So yes, my background was building major sort of rewards and loyalty programs for major payment card issuers and networks. And yes, Boson can be used for commerce transactions. It can also be used for things like loyalty rewards programs, like crypto native rewards programs. And we've seen a huge amount of traction in that area. So much so that we've had to hire up, scale a whole new team.
And you're based in London, the apparent fintech capital of the world. So I would imagine, so on that note, how can our audience reach you? How can they find out more about Boson Protocol, about you're doing, and reach your team if they have questions and they want to collaborate?
So through the website, bosonprotocol.io. Follow us on Twitter at Boson Protocol, on Telegram at Boson Protocol. We're doing a huge number of events, and also join us in Decentraland at Boson Portal, where you can come and buy hero items. And also we're launching on Friday a kind of gamified experience called The Cube, where you can kind of play games and get a chance to win Boson tokens, all as part of this immersive experience. So I just encourage everyone to try the technology, play and learn and enjoy.
Amazing. All right. So I can't wait to use, my Revolut app and my banking. I can't go to see visit my bank in the metaverse and find my digital locker, and, take out all of the digital assets from that, NFTs from that locker in my Metro bank in the metaverse. So on that happy note, there is obviously a big opportunity for fintech to innovate in that space. And thank you so much for joining us today, Justin. Always a pleasure to speak to you, and all the best for your upcoming launch and all the great things you're building. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.